we give you thanks again for your presence among us. We give you thanks for the many things that you are up to in our midst, things that sometimes we aren't even aware of. God, we thank you that in a world that so desperately needs hope and joy, that you have gifted us with all that we need to do the kind of work that brings hope and joy to others. We thank you for being with us and with those who we love during difficult times, to help keep our spirits up and to remind us that there is light, even in times of darkness, that there is hope in times of hopelessness, that hope is found in you and in your Son, Jesus Christ. We lift up the family of Serena's neighbor and those everywhere who are grieving or who are hurting or going through pain. And we ask that just through your presence and through the work that you do through us, and even in spite of us, that you would help to bring comfort and peace to all those in your world who hurt. We thank you, and we pray this in all things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So this morning we get to continue with the theme of thankfulness, trying to be thankful not just on that one day a year, but that truly we have a lot to be thankful for. And just to recap kind of where we've been, a few weeks ago we thank God for those who went before us, who paved the way for the faith that we have. Last week we thank God for the gift of life, not just the life that we live here and now, but the eternal life that we get to have a foretaste of, even here and now. And today we get to consider how we might be thankful for the hope that God gives us. And rather than reading Isaiah's words right now, I'm actually going to save those for during the sermon because I think they have more meaning if we hear them within some of that context. I want to ask you, have you ever hoped for something, and then when you finally got it, you realize it wasn't quite what you had hoped for? Maybe you actually got the dog, or you got the cranberry jelly, right? And it wasn't quite what you had expected, and you were disappointed. I remember when I was in high school, when I was a junior, our school started what's called an indoor drum line. If you're not familiar with that genre of musical group, it's kind of like marching band, except instead of doing things during the fall, you do it during the winter. Instead of being on a football field, you're in a high school gymnasium. And instead of having woodwinds and brass instruments in the color guard, you just have percussion instruments. Marimbas, xylophones, timpanis, snare drums, bass drums, and if you're smart, earplugs. From the end of marching band season all the way through March, the 20 or so of us in that group rehearsed 3 afternoons a week after school, and any Saturday mornings that we didn't have competitions, so that we could prepare for weekend competitions against groups from other schools. But one Saturday, when we were gathered for a rehearsal that none of us really cared to be at, because it was a Saturday, one of our group members didn't show up. And his absence was unexcused. He had to call the director to say that he was going to be late or that he wouldn't be there. Now, our group was really competitive, and we were also teenagers. And so we didn't like it that one of our group members hadn't shown up when we had. And not only that, but the director wasn't happy. In fact, our director even said, he better be really sick not to be here without telling anyone. Well, it wasn't until later that afternoon that we learned that our friend Reggie had been really sick. And in fact, that morning while we were rehearsing, he had gone into cardiac arrest. And at the age of 16, he died. The only child of a single mom. After the initial shock of Reggie's death, those of us in the group decided that we were going to dedicate the rest of our season, which hadn't really even started yet, to our fallen friend who had died. We were going to do everything we could to win everything that we could in his memory. And so the competition started, and we did well. And the season went on, and we continued to do well. All winter long, we pushed ourselves, spending hour after hour practicing the same dash The day of state finals arrived, a competition that we had worked hard all year to win in celebration of Reggie's life. And when it came time for the awards to be announced following the final school's performance, we won. We won. State champions. People don't care quite as much about indoor drumline as they do about football, but hey, it was a championship. And we jumped up and down, and we congratulated one another, and we hugged one another, and we cried, and we draped our medals around our necks. And it was wonderful. We celebrated not only what we had accomplished, but the one in whose memory we had accomplished it. The next Monday at school, we all proudly wore our medals to school to make sure everybody knew about what we had done. And we basked with great joy when on the school morning announcements, the principal announced what we had done to the other 2,000 plus students at our school. The high that we enjoyed from that Saturday evening to that Monday morning felt great. And then Tuesday rolled around. And there were no more rehearsals. There were no more competitions. There were no more people patting us on the back saying, "Hey, way to go, good job." And we realized that even with what we had accomplished, we were still a bunch of teenagers who were grieving the loss of a friend who was still just as gone then as he had been before. As much as we value what we had accomplished, most of the people around us that day were no longer remembering what we had done, if they were ever even aware of it at all. Even with what we had achieved, we still had homework. We still had projects. We still had questions about what the future would hold for us after school. Winning that championship felt great. But once we achieved it, it wasn't quite what we had dreamed of. We were still hurting, broken. We have all experienced disappointment to varying degrees. But we all know what it feels like. We all know what letdown feels like. We all know what pain and grief feel like. We've had relationships that began with seemingly limitless possibilities that somehow never lived up to what we would have dreamed. We've had dreams and aspirations that have come falling down. We've seen injustices done, maybe against ourselves, and we thought, well, whenever that person or those people are brought to justice, then I will finally feel vindicated and whole. And then whoever it is receives their punishment, and we realize we're every bit as broken as we were before justice came. We've received diagnoses that we had never hoped for. We've perhaps had loved ones who received treatments that we were told worked 99% of the time, only to discover that our loved one was in that 1%. We thought that that candidate we supported was going to be different from everyone else and really change the world, only for them to lose or to see them win and turn out to be like everybody else. We've lost someone too soon who we didn't expect to lose. We've all experienced disappointment and letdown, which can easily lead us into hopelessness and despair. I think one of the reasons the Bible has stood the test of time is because the stories of the people in it are really our story, even as different as they were from us. Their disappointments and losses are our disappointments, even if they're very different. Take, for example, the ancient Israelites. They were the people who were descended from Abraham, who God had promised would become this great nation that would be more numerous than the stars, and this nation that would be blessed, and that the rest of the world would be blessed through them. They were the people God had rescued from Egypt and brought out of slavery through the desert into the promised land. They had made this land a home for generations and generations and generations, and had the experience many times of having abundance and security and God's blessing. In fact, they even believed that God had promised King David that this kingdom that they enjoyed would last forever. And then a few things happened. the year 722 BC, the Assyrian army defeated the northern part of this kingdom called Israel, for any historians out there keeping track of dates. In 586 BC, the Babylonian army defeated the southern part of the kingdom called Judah. Jerusalem, this holy city, was destroyed. The temple, which was thought by many to be the very dwelling place of God, was ransacked and destroyed. Many of the Israelites, men, women, mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, children, were killed, oftentimes brutally. Many of those who survived were taken from their homes by force and resettled in lands outside of their country in various different places so that they couldn't band together and revolt. Even though God had once promised that this kingdom would have no end, here they were, defeated, demoralized, destroyed, living in a foreign land that they had not chosen, longing to get back home, to where things used to be, and to how things used to be back in the good old days. What's known as the Babylonian exile lasted nearly 50 years, which might not seem like that long a time when you're looking at the whole scope of history, but what that means is that most of those people who were taken into captivity died before they ever had a chance to return home. But those who were younger when they had been taken captive and resettled into other lands and who were living were finally allowed to return home almost 50 years after they had been taken away. And I imagine that it's something they had dreamed of and hoped about for years and years and years. They had dreamed of, I'm going to go back and see this person when I go back home. Or I'm going to go back to this place that was so special to me when I go back home. And the memories probably stream back of all those times when they were kids, when they'd gone swimming on Saturday morning. Well, I guess they were Jewish, so on Friday mornings in the Jordan River. Or times that they'd gone out on the Sea of Galilee and gone fishing. After being gone for so long under such difficult circumstances, they were finally going to get to go home. And then they got there. You ever gone back home after a long time being away, only to discover that home isn't home anymore? The people they had so looked forward to seeing were no longer there because they had either died or had chosen not to come back. Or the few who did come back were so different that they were hardly recognizable. The places they so fondly remembered were either gone or at the very least were so different they could not be recognized anymore. I imagine that where the building once stood, where these people had worshipped God week after week after week, now it had been bulldozed and there was sitting McDonald's. Serving biscuits and sandwiches that had ham and bacon and other things on them that God had said they could not eat. And the spot that had been sacred, it was now unclean. That field where all the kids in the neighborhood used to play baseball until it was too dark to see the ball whizzing by, had been paved and turned into a parking lot for a movie theater that had long since been boarded up and tagged with graffiti. Where their homes had once been, there were now high-rise apartments that were filled with foreigners who had moved in, replacing them when the exile began. People who looked different, who spoke different languages, and who worshiped different gods. Their money now read, "In Marduk we trust," bearing the name of the God of the very people who had conquered them and killed their family members and loved ones. Whereas they had once lived like kings, they now lived in the slums. They had so looked forward to returning home only to discover that what they had hoped for did not live up to its billing. Have you ever known disappointment and letdown? Like those Israelites of old, we've all experienced disappointment and hopelessness, even if not to the same extent that they did. We grieve those things that used to be that are no longer, and we grieve those things that are that we wish were not. We, like they, pour our hearts and our souls spouses and children and our church and our community and our work, but sometimes if we're honest with ourselves, when we step back, we wonder if it's really making a difference at all. We look to the past, wondering how we can rekindle the joy and the hope that we once had, or we look to the future, wondering if things will get better, resigned sometimes to the belief that the best days are in the past rather than in the future. But into the midst of that dark, powerless place where we all find ourselves sometimes, God spoke to those ancient Israelites in their pain and disappointment, and I believe to us too, and said these words that we have recorded as Isaiah 65, 17 through 25. And here's what God said. For I am about to create a new heavens and a new earth. The former things, the exile, the pain, the disappointment, shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. You know, a lot of times we think that God created a long time ago. But here God says, I am creating. God is still creating. God is still just as much at work now as God was in Genesis 1 through 3. He says, for I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem, this object of your grief and sorrow that has been destroyed, and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it. Yeah, right, they probably thought. Or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies at 100 will be considered a youth, and one who falls short at 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them, rather than building houses that they then get kicked out of and other people come behind them and live in. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit, rather than planting only to get kicked out, so that others can eat what they grow. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be. And my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, for they shall be offspring blessed by the Lord and their descendants as well. Before they answer, not after, but before they answer, before they call, I will answer. While they are speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, but the serpent, its food shall be dust. They shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. Can you imagine having seen the things that those people saw? Having seen loved ones have their lives taken, and to live in a land where nobody understood them and where people believed things that they didn't. And returned home and felt the disappointment of seeing that home was no longer home, but then hearing those words that perhaps God was not done. No matter their pain and disappointment or ours, no matter how distant God might seem, God spoke to them and speaks to us in the midst of brokenness, in the midst of our disappointments, in the midst of our griefs and our sorrows, and in the midst of our hopelessness, and says, I'm not done. There is hope because I am. There is hope for justice because I, the God of justice, am. There is hope for reconciliation and peace with enemies because I am the God who can make wolves and lambs feed beside each other rather than on each other. There is hope for a way where there seems to be no way because I am still creating just as I was creating long ago when I made the earth and the sky and the sun and the moon and you and called it good. There is hope that the best days for my kingdom are not way back in the past but are in the future because I am the one who holds that future. There is hope, God says. Like the ancient Israelites, we have plenty of reasons to sometimes feel disappointed and discouraged. We live in a world in which we see in the news people taking their own lives or even the lives of others. I know we had another shooting in a school this week. We see in the news images of parents and children separated from one another. And it would be understandable if a person, even a follower of Jesus Christ, would look out at the world and feel hopeless sometimes. About 2 months ago at Bible study, I mentioned a story about a time when I was watching something that was going on in the news, and I got depressed, and one of the group members said, "Why were you watching the news? There's nothing good." It can be easy to be resigned and hopeless. But in such a world, God says, "I am still up to something." And so the question is not whether we have reason to hope. The question is whether or not we will have the courage and the imagination to see it and to have it. Will we be people in the midst of a hurting and broken world who have hope? And here's why the way we answer that question is important. Because, friends, we as the Church of Jesus Christ are a movement. We are God's movement in the world to bring healing where there is brokenness, to bring love where there is apathy, to bring peace and reconciliation where there is enmity and anger, to bring forgiveness where relationship has ceased. And if we are a movement, then as someone has recently said, what makes a movement strong is not the number of people willing to give money, but the number of people willing to believe there is hope. What makes a movement strong is not the number of people willing to give money, but the number of people willing to believe there is hope. Or in the words of the great preacher William Sloane Coffin, hope is a state of mind independent of the state of the world. So if your heart's full of hope, you can be persistent even when you can't be optimistic. You can keep the faith despite the evidence, knowing that only in so doing has the evidence any chance of changing. My friends, no matter the disappointments and the pains you have faced, no matter the pains and disappointments you might face now, no matter the pains and disappointments you might feel as you look out in the world and at the future, do not lose hope. Rather, keep the faith despite the evidence, knowing that only in so doing has the evidence any chance of changing. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please stand now as you are able.